Welcome to Orchid's presentation on Extender as an integration tool. My name is Nathalie, and today we will focus on integration between Sage 300 and other applications using Extender. Extender is becoming a platform of choice to customize Sage 300 in a wide range of scenarios. Many projects we have worked on and queries we receive on how to use Extender over the past few years have included some form of integration. So we felt it was timely to present different scenarios where we have used Extender for integration purposes and highlight how Extender can facilitate integration between Sage 300 and other systems, in particular cloud-based applications. We will start with a brief overview of Extender and its benefits for integration projects, discuss how it can be supplemented with other Orchid modules such as Process Scheduler and Orchid Notes to enhance the integration. Integration has a broad range of meanings, from alerts and communication integration to customizing standard packaged connectors to Sage 300, to integrating to document management systems, and a range of export from Sage 300 and imports into Sage 300. More broadly, when some of these elements are grouped together, you can end up with a custom connector, such as the DemoMain Connector for Sage 300, DemoMain being an asset management specialized software. We'll discuss a few of these examples, and then we will look at detailed demo using Extender for vendor integration and for custom alerts and communication, look at an example to import data into Sage 300, and a detailed presentation of the DemoMain Connector. Many of you have seen this overview of Extender before, but let's look at it now in the context of integration. Extender is designed to work at the Sage 300 view level, ensuring that the Sage 300 business logic and data integrity is maintained when inserting or updating records and customizing the business logic. With its ability to customize the views and the Sage 300 desktop screens and trigger workflows when records are inserted or updated, Extender is a great addition to any integration project. With the Configurator edition, you can attach events to specific fields, so your custom integration is only triggered when specific fields change. For example, AP vendor integration was one of the first projects that we actually developed using Extender. Programs that import data into Sage 300 using the views will interact with the customizations developed in Extender. So if you have a validation on OE orders, when orders are imported through a third-party application, that validation will apply. In addition, you can also write Extender scripts to import data into any Sage 300 views using the Customizer or Developer edition. And you can use Extender custom screens to prompt the user to run the import. So Extender is not only designed to manage existing data, you can actually create new records with Sage 300. If you need custom tables to store your configuration parameters, your staging tables, data that you might want to use in reporting projects, Extender is an ideal module to create the custom table, which will be developed in the Sage 300 SDK, where the table will be in the Sage Data Dictionary. It will dump and load. It will be available for reporting. Finally, I'll mention that the runtime version is available for partners who want to build an integration connector between Sage 300 and other applications for a wide range of users, such as the DemoMain Connector. And we'll discuss the implications of using runtime when we look at the DemoMain Connector. Why would we use Extender as an integration tool to Sage 300? As we discussed in a blog last year, while most businesses march towards cloud-based IT infrastructure, many Sage 300 sites today are hosted on premises rather than in the cloud, and many are likely to stay that way for years to come. And while our ERP software might be confined to the server room, it doesn't follow that our business needs to be so constrained. In the medium term, the main game won't be cloud hosting as much as cloud enablement or cloud connectivity. And the keyword to support this cloud connectivity is integration. You can use Extender scripts and API to cloud applications to populate data and trigger events when data changes in Sage 300. You can import from specialized cloud applications into Sage 300 for integrated reporting and processing, thereby reducing time and money spent on manual data entry. And we will look at a few examples of that soon. Business process visibility. While there are many ways to integrate, Using Extender allows to create custom tables in Sage 300 that can hold your connector details, your staging tables, and data from other applications that you want to use in transaction processing and reporting. You can use Orchid Notes and Document Management Link to document the integration. And you can also use Orchid Notes and Extender scripts to display relevant data from outside Sage 300. It can be data from Sage CRM, from Twitter, from LinkedIn. Your customization and integration projects developed in Extender are easier to upgrade and maintain. The integrity of the Sage 300 data is maintained as we're using the Sage 300 view for the customization. The custom scripts are stored in the database, will dump and load. And in an upgrade, you only need to upgrade Extender, retest. There is no need to recompile the source code like with custom EXEs. The integration can be streamlined as you can trigger the export only when specific fields change. You don't need to track when the records were last exported. The export can be a script that will push data to other systems and not just export to a file. So integration projects using Extender are generally very cost effective. Some integration framework can be more complex and not easily customizable. You can consider using the runtime edition of Extender if you're building an integration that will apply to many companies, like the DemoMain integration. Optionally, Process Scheduler can be implemented to schedule imports automatically at regular intervals. When using Extender, you have access to Extender's functions, sample scripts, email message templates, workflow setup, and other alert configuration. And as most of you are aware by now, Extender scripts are written in Python, which is fast becoming the most widely used programming language. So you should find skilled resources to develop the integration, and you have a wide range of Python packages available to support advanced integration. What supports the breadth of this integration capacity is the ability to leverage all these packages. For example, when importing from Excel, for communication integration, for postcode validation, for other integration to cloud applications, where there are packages that help build the content of the integration communications in the right format, caters for all the different versions of Excel, the different scenarios that you don't have to recode for that in your own integration. Let's look at some example scenarios. For example, Extender can be used for alerts and communications. For communication integrations such as pushing information to Slack, Microsoft Teams, Twitter, SMS using Twilio, the Sage 300 bot, Facebook, LinkedIn. Extender is great to send alerts like that outside of Sage 300, beyond simple emails. It can also send alerts when data is pushed into Sage 300 using the API. For example, if you use a user called Web Connector, when creating records in Sage 300 from a web store, you can log whenever this connector user logs into Sage, and you can start a workflow to approve those transactions created by the integration. You can also use Orchid Notes and Extender scripts to read data from other systems and display them in Sage 300. For example, you can read data from cloud-based application using a Python package. So using the LinkedIn Python API, or you can read data from Sage CRM using web services or using direct connection to SQL. And some of this data that's outside of Sage 300 that you can read using an Extender script, you can also use in your Extender scripts. For example, if you need to do some address and postcode validation, you can use Python to connect to the Canada Post and the US Postal Service postal code databases in Python packages to validate the addresses that are entered. You can do something similar with freight calculation. And using packages means that the ongoing maintenance of this customization is easier and more cost-effective. Extender can also be used to support and tailor standard integrations. For example, when using the standard Sage CRM to Sage 300 integration to create orders, you could start a workflow for the orders or the quotes to be approved before they're released into your main Sage 300 system. Same with orders coming from a web store, and we'll look at an example of that a bit later. If you're populating some optional fields to some required value, you can also use those to trigger the next steps of the process in Sage 300. We have also built examples of overriding standard integrations would be to set some prices or some costs in ways that the standard connector between the web store and Sage 300 doesn't let you do, but you can do that with Extender and overriding what gets created by the standard application. We're often asked if Document Management Link can display documents in other systems than SharePoint or a network folder. And there's a two-part answer to that. For Dropbox or Google Docs, if you sync them to a workstation or a network folder, then standard DML functionality can work on the synced folders as they're actually a de facto network folder. However, if you use a system such as FileHold or Trim to do some OCR recognition and create some documents, you could also use Extender and Notes to display links to documents generated by those systems and attach the hyperlink to a Sage 300 screen through an Extended Notes. Or if those systems create the documents in folders that DML can read, you can also use DML, of course, to read documents created by those systems. Moving on to different types of integration scenarios, primarily importing data into Sage 300 and exporting, let's dive into that now. When you export out of Sage 300 using Extender, you can do a bulk export. When you want to do a take-on out of Sage 300 into your other application, and you can tell me, well, I can do that out of the box by exporting out of Sage 300, which is true, but in some cases you might need to link multiple tables from Sage 300, and yes, you can also do a crystal report and export out of this. But if you have an Extender script that does your bulk export and, for example, reads all the IC items, but also needs to go and look at the reorder quantity in a different view, you can do that repeatedly, run your scripts repeatedly as part of testing the take-on and redoing it later in one step, rather than run your report, export, save, import. You can also configure Extender for an ongoing export to only trigger the export when certain fields changes. In the vendor integration example that we will look at soon, we don't want to trigger the update of the other system when the year-to-date purchases from that vendor are updated. We only want to trigger it when the address details or the vendor name change. We can also use Extender to export AP payments, including optional fields, to specialized software like TrackMate, a specialized writing and transport management system. We have developed examples where we export AR customer details and IC pricing details for a quoting cloud-based web portal, and that's exporting in a web services format. In the DemoMain integration and other asset management maintenance systems, we would typically export details from IC items, IC stock location details, reorder quantities, AP vendors, purchase orders, purchase requisitions, purchase receipts, and purchase invoices, depending on the scenarios. When importing, you can create new records with Extender. So you can import from a variety of formats: Excel, CSV, XML, SQL staging tables, and you can import into standard Sage 300 tables, pretty much anything that is required. Some examples that we have done recently would be pure requisitions, pure receipts, Pacific Tech purchase requisition, OE orders, IC internal usage, IC adjustments, AP invoices, for example, from specialized restaurant industry software, GL data from a student billing system. And we can also import into Extender custom tables. For example, we're importing sell-through data provided by wholesalers so that they can be used in reports against what's actually been shipped out of our warehouses. Now, to support these imports and exports, you can use Extender and Python packages, which, as we've mentioned before, they support such imports, make them more solid, and deal with errors better. You can run those import scripts manually, or you can use Process Scheduler to automate the import process. and you can use Orchid Notes to document the integration. This is particularly relevant when you combine a series of exports and a series of imports into a full connector, like the DemoMain integration package. So now we're going to finally go into Sage 300 and show you some examples of using Extender for alerts and communication integrations. A lot of what we're going to show you is based on what we did a few months ago in a collaboration in action webinar. So you can find that on our website, where we demonstrated a scenario where customers, purchasing and sales department were using Sage 300 and various cloud-based platforms to support their collaboration. So we're not going to redo that whole webinar and scenario, but I'm going to show you a couple of examples. First, we're going to show you how we can log certain users logging on to Sage 300, for example, a dedicated user for your imported or API created transactions, and how we can start the workflow when transactions are created by a particular user. Looking at communication integration, I'll show you an example of using notes to display LinkedIn profile and also pushing information into Microsoft Teams when an order requires approval. We will then look at an Extender event to trigger a vendor integration exe. We'll look at an example of importing GL transactions. So let's now look at using Extender for alerts and communication types of integration. I'm going to log into Sage 300 and create an order. I'm going to create an order for Coastal Electric, 10 desk lamps. I'm logged onto the web store as if I was logged on to an actual web store and using the API to create an order in Sage 300. You can see that the order has been put on hold until approved. So in the background, the workflow has started, put the order on hold automatically, and told me that web orders require approval. It's also created a note. So the same process can happen provided you can have a way to identify the transactions imported or created by an API or by a third-party application. It can be an optional field, it can be the unique user who's only used by the API, or it can be a range of order number, an item category, etc. Let's now log into Sage 300 as admin or as a power user, and I can see a few things in my log. I'm going to filter on just the web store user, and I basically have a history of all the times that that particular user has logged on to Sage 300. It's one more auditing feature in relation to the integration and how the API is used in Sage 300. If I look at my workflow console, I can see here all the orders that have been started by the web store with a description, and from here I can approve or reject if I know what that's all about, or I can drill down and actually open the order that I've just created, and the note that was generated when this order was created is also displaying here against my order. We're seeing now how Extender can help us log transactions created by integration by users that are used in integration programs. Let's now have a look at how Extender can help us with communication types of integration. If I create a new order for Mr. Ronald Black, I can see here that I've got a note with a link to Ronald Black's company LinkedIn profile. So from that hyperlink, I can click and open the LinkedIn page. So in a similar principle, I can display notes, Twitter information. I can also use Python packages and webhooks to push information from Sage 300 into Twitter. I can also use Twilio to send some SMS notifications when things happen in Sage 300 or through the workflow. And one example that we have implemented in this database is sending a notification to a Microsoft Teams platform. Microsoft Teams is a collaboration platform that forms part of the Office 365 suite. All the orders that we've created, started by the web user, have created a post in that Microsoft Teams channel saying that this order requires approval, and I've got a bit of information about the order, being the customer number and the PO number. So this helps collaborate using tools in the cloud outside of Sage 300. And we're not going to look at the detailed setup, but I'll just show you briefly how this is configured in this example. If I open the workflow template, I can see that in my new order step, I've got an action to add a post to Microsoft Teams, having my webhook, and this is where I configure the description, the title of that post, and the detail of that post. And I can add more information about the customer or the order if I need. So this is a really simple way of pushing some information out of Sage 300 into some communications platform. And the same principle if you're using SMS in Twilio or the Slack integration platform. If you use Python packages to support these types of integration, you have even more flexibility in how you format the message and how you configure the connector. Next example we're going to look at is actually configured in Orchid sample data, and it's about exporting details out of Sage 300 when vendor detail changes, or rather I should say call a vendor integration program whenever vendor details change. So to do this, it's a two-step process in Extender. First, we create an event of type vendor integration. We configure it to combine whenever a few fields change on the particular record. We only call the program once, and the action is run the program. Program is a program called vendor integration.exe. In many cases, it's a .NET exe that we put somewhere on the Sage 300 server, which accepts as a parameter the vendor ID. And then, based on that vendor ID, it pushes details to a cloud-based expense management system, for example. So I create my event, and then I'm going to attach that event to the AP vendor screen in Sage 300. And this event is then attached to all the fields that I want to track on the vendor table. So in this example, I've set up the country, the lines of address, the state, and the vendor name. I could also trigger whenever anything changes on the vendor using update, or when a new vendor is created using insert and upsert. But there are many fields on the vendor table that shouldn't really trigger calling our program and updating that custom expense management system. But I might want to add the credit limit. If the credit limit changes, I also want to trigger my program. So it makes the setup to know which fields will trigger the update of the other system visible to users by looking at the Extender setup. Makes it easier to maintain, and as we have mentioned before, in case of an upgrade, you just need to install and activate the latest version of Extender, and your custom program should run. Next example we're going to look at is a custom script to import AP invoices into Sage 300. We've imported our Extender module, and it has added a new icon to my Sage 300 desktop under the AP transactions menu. You could add it to another menu if required. When I use this new menu, import AP invoices, I get a screen that is developed using Extender. I can then browse to where my files are saved. I'm going to start with this one first. I click import. I get to confirm that I want to import my transactions into AP. It does a first round of validation because we have designed this import that if any one transaction is not valid, for example, the fiscal period is wrong, or the vendor doesn't exist, or the GL account doesn't exist, none of the transactions get imported. So in this case, there are no validation errors, so it is going to import and create a batch into Sage 300 and archiving the import file. I can see that the file has moved to the archive folder. If I try and import this file, you can see that it's found some errors validating. The errors being that the fiscal year that is in the file is not found. The fiscal year and fiscal period doesn't exist yet, hasn't been opened yet in Sage 300. I've also got an error saying and that there's an account that doesn't exist in the general ledger. So it's doing the validation of all the file. I can go and update it and then import it. So let's just double check that my invoice batch has been created. It's batch 90, the description is the file name, and I've got the entries that I had in the file. This one is importing from a text file, but we could do a similar thing, similar import using Excel. And in many cases, the easiest way to import using Excel and Extender is to use a Python package to import Excel, as it deals with the different versions of Excel, opening the right sheet, etc., and has a lot of pre-validation that makes the Excel import easier. We've seen a few examples of how Extender can help us with alerts and communication integrations. We can log when a dedicated user or when special transactions are imported or created by an API. We can start the workflow. We've seen an example when the user was web store, but similar things can happen if transactions are created by the Sage CRM integration, for example. We've seen an example of displaying LinkedIn profile in an Orchid note when entering an order or when viewing a customer. How we can post to Microsoft Teams through the Extender workflow or in a custom script when a transaction is posted in Sage 300. We've looked at how to call a custom program that gets triggered when certain fields change on specific records in Sage 300, in our example AP vendor. We've also looked at importing AP transactions from text file, CSV file, and using Python packages from Excel. We can do the same thing, importing other types of transactions into Sage 300, such as GL journal entries. Now we're going to put all these types of examples together into a connector that we have built to integrate with DemoMain asset management software. So this is a brief image presenting the levels, the points of integration between DemoMain and Sage 300. So when purchase requests are entered in DemoMain, they get exported and imported into Sage 300 as a purchase requisition, or optionally as a Pacific Tech purchase requisition. When works orders are entered in DemoMain, that's a consumption of stock, a stock movement, and in Sage 300 it is an IC internal usage transaction if the stock is used, or when stock is returned, it's an IC adjustment. Then we have periodic updates of details from Sage 300 into DemoMain when stock movements happen, when PO receipts are processed, when AP vendor details change, or when stock details, IC details change. The connector uses Extender and a custom Extender module to build the integration. It exports IC, AP, and PO details from Sage 300 and it's designed to import IC internal usage requests, adjustments, and PO requisitions from DemoMain. It is built using Extender runtime, so the integration details cannot be modified. The only thing you can configure is the parameters that are specific to your setup. Optionally, you can use Process Scheduler Level 1 to schedule the script that runs the import from DemoMain. And when you need to configure this, you need to set up Process Scheduler and configure the task scheduler. If you need to modify the connector in any way, you would need to upgrade to another version of Extender, Configurator, Customizer, or Developer. Or if you need to use Extender for other customizations in addition to what is built in the DemoMain connector. We have some online documentation to support the installation and the configuration and using the connector. So I'm going to log into my DemoMain sample data database. You can see we have a menu called DemoMain Connector, and from here I can check the DemoMain parameter configuration screens, which includes the path to where the files to DemoMain are generated from Sage 300 and the files that I need to import are saved there. I can choose to auto-post the transactions that are created in Sage 300, and there are a lot of optional fields that are used to tie up the transactions that are created by the integration so that you can report on them. I've configured, in addition to the DemoMain connector, Orchid notes to document my my configuration screen there, and I've also attached to this screen some documents from Document Management Link, so I can see when I need to manually process some files for whatever reason. I can see the files that need to be imported, and I can see here the files that are exported out of Sage 300 for import into DemoMain quickly from Sage 300. So that's quite a nice addition to the standard connector. When I use the Import Internal Usage menu, it opens a custom screen developed in Extender, and when I click Import, I get a dialog with the user, so all the functionality that you're used to in the .NET EXE you can do in Extender. It's giving me a confirmation that the import was complete and that in this example there were no errors. This is the scenario where I'm using the manual screen, the Sage 300 screen, the manual button to import. Let's check that the transactions have been created successfully. I'm going to look at my internal usage screen. I can see that it's created an internal usage transactions with 2 lines, the quantities as they were in my file. If I look at my optional fields, I've got my source is DemoMain, I've got the DemoMain work order number in there, and if it's filled into the file, I will also have the cost center that this order is associated with. And if I look at my IC adjustments, I've also got an IC adjustment, the same work order, the description in there, and it's creating adjustments of type both increase, because in some cases I'm returning some item to stock from DemoMain, but most of the times the DemoMain import will create internal usage transaction, meaning that it's drawing from the existing stock. If I don't have the existing stock, when I import the PO requisition, it will create PO requisitions to place the order for the parts to be purchased in Sage 300. I have run these imports manually in this example. I can also configure Process Scheduler and schedule to actually run the imports. And then I have the history there if there was an error or if it was successful, and send a notification to the relevant support person when there is an error. So this process can basically run automatically and make sure that the stock is in sync between Sage 300 and CMMS solution, saving time, reducing admin overheads, and reducing the duplication of data and data entry. If I go and update IC items reorder quantities, for example. Just take this one. Let me make that, for example, 250. When I save that, and the easiest way to get back to my file is to look here. See this stock. Going to this is where the files are saved. You can see that it's been updated today. I'm going to edit this, and this line was added with my new reorder quantity of 250. So this files builds until it gets processed into DemoMain when it gets cleared, and a new file gets started. And these are the fields that are updated whenever they change. The item number, the location, your average cost, quantity on hand, quantity on order, and minimum and maximum level. Similarly, when my AP vendor change, let's look at an example with AP vendor. I'm going to change AP vendor's address. I'm going to change the contact name or the contact email, Carl Jenner 2. I've now got a supplier file and a supplier contact file, because in DemoMain, even though the details are in the same table in Sage 300, it goes into two separate tables in DemoMain, two separate files. So we have this ability to call different events from the same table for different fields on the same table in Sage 300. If we have a quick look at how this is set up in the background, you can see that we've got some DemoMain event type, bulk export, and then the single export, two types of exports. And then if I look at view events, scripts and workflow, I can see all the tables that are actually in the DemoMain connector. So if I start with vendor, can see that all these fields on the vendor table have a DemoMain event attached to them. So the vendor ID, vendor name, vendor group, basic address details, phone number, etc. Go to export, and the contact and contact phone, fax and email go to a file called subcontact. And attached to that are also two scripts. One script that calls the subcontact creates a file type subcontact, and then when the event is DemoMain export, it creates a file called, or it updates or creates a file called supply.csv, and it runs this script. So it's the same script that is run but with different parameters. So again, that makes this whole process easier to maintain. If I look at my GL segment code, it's a similar concept. When a new segment is added or the description changed, this file called cc.csv is updated, and we pass the segment of the GL account that represents the cost center in DemoMain. And it works in a similar way for all the files that are exported out of Sage 300. Your IC transaction history, IC location details, IC items, vendor item numbers, locations or warehouse, your reorder quantities, unit of measures, and purchase orders, lines, details, and optional fields, as well as purchase requisitions. We won't look at the detail of the script right now, but this is something that if you have any questions on how this is designed, you can ask us separately. We've had a brief look at the DemoMain connector to integrate CMMS asset management system to Sage 300, using it to export IC, AP, and PO details from Sage 300 and import internal usage and IC adjustments and PO requisition from DemoMain into Sage 300. We've seen that you can run the imports manually or through Process Scheduler, and we've looked at the various scripts and events and view events and scripts that are part of the out-of-the-box connector. All this built on Extender runtime, as it is designed to be run by a number of Sage 300 sites. If you need to modify the connector or use Extender for other configuration in your Sage 300 system, then you would upgrade to Extender Configurator or Developer Edition. This shows you how Extender can be used to build a package, an automated connection between another on-premise solution or a cloud-based solution and Sage 300 to minimize the processing time relating to the maintenance tasks, to reduce the admin overheads, increase the reliability of the data by reducing duplication and the risk of input errors. In conclusions, we'll share with you a few tips and ideas, general approach and implementation steps for such integration projects. As you can see from the examples that we've looked at, integration has a very broad range of meaning and can be a simple alert to another system to a full-blown connector between various applications. So a key component of managing such a project is going to be to gather the requirements, design the integration, get the sign-off from the user, from the third party that you're integrating to, then obviously build and develop it, and document the integration using Orchid Notes, and DML is a good way to cater for this documentation requirements, and then obviously test the integration. In most of these projects, you will end up with a custom table, either for parameters that are stored in the Extender custom table, giving visibility to your configuration, to the configuration of your integration. You can have a custom table for imported data that you might want to use in processing or in reporting, mapping external tables and files to the standard Sage 300 tables. You will have some scripts to export data from Sage 300. And that would involve listing all the Sage 300 tables and fields and views that you want to export. What file format? Is it just an alert? Is it CSV? Is it XML? Are we calling a web service to push data? If we're creating files, where are we saving them? If we are communicating to a cloud-based platform, how do we connect? Do we need to do any calculations? Are any filters required? Do we export all vendors or only vendors in a particular group? When we're importing data into Sage 300, the simplest way to do this would be, for example, to display some non-Sage 300 data on Sage 300 screen using Orchid Nodes. So while it may not be considered a very deep integration, it is still a way to show information out of other systems in Sage 300. These imports are going to be manual or automatic using Process Scheduler. When we're importing, do we need to pre-validate the data? Check if the fiscal period is open, if the item exists, if the vendor exists, if the customer exists, if the customer is on hold. And what happens if some of this data is not valid? Do we continue and process all the records that are okay, or do we stop processing and only process the file if all the records are okay? Sometimes you might use a dummy customer or dummy item for invalid data so that you can keep bringing the data into the system, put them on hold, manage them, but they're already in Sage 300, so you can deal with them in a more thorough way. So these are just some ideas that we've explored over the last few months and years, building some of these projects, and we keep building on these tips and implementation approach. And we often send you these types of questions when you ask us for quotes, or can we do this using Extender? So in summary, we've seen how Extender can be used for integration with Sage 300 and the various benefits that Extender has to support integration projects. We've looked at a range of examples from alerts and communication integration to cloud applications. We've discussed how we can customize standard integrations by identifying those transactions created by standard integrations such as Sage CRM or web stores to log or to start a workflow. We've discussed that we can display links to cloud-based application in Orchid Notes using Extender scripts or just notes, for example LinkedIn, or also links to other documents management software. And we've looked at various examples of exporting out of Sage 300 and importing into Sage 300. We've looked at an example of using Extender Configurator to run an exe when Sage 300 records change. In this example, AP vendor details. We've looked at an Extender Customizer script to import data into Sage 300. To actually use the Extender Developer Edition as we had our import parameters stored in a custom table. And we've looked more closely at the DemoMain Connector. For more information on using Extender as an integration platform, you can look at our tailoring and integration solution page on the website. You can look at the video on collaboration in action using Orchid modules. Read our blog on integration to support Sage 300 integration with cloud applications, which may be a few months old but is still very relevant in today's environment. And we'd also encourage you to read our blog regularly. You will often find some very insightful and entertaining information about Orchid modules and Sage 300. Thank you for your time.